There are some advanced strategies in the points and miles world that can completely change your game and revolutionize the points and miles world for you, but only if you understand how they actually work. Buying gold to earn points, elite status, or to hit massive welcome bonuses is definitely one of those strategies. But as you'll hear in today's episode, this is not as simple as walking into a store, swiping a credit card, and magically coming out ahead. Today, Patrick Sugarman joins us to get into the real mechanics behind buying and reselling gold, why people do it, what can go right, and more importantly, what can go very wrong if you don't understand the risk. But that's only half the conversation, because once you earn the points and book these big, once-in-a-lifetime trips, the next question is, are you actually protected if something goes sideways? Well, with his background in insurance and risk management, we talk through travel insurance, credit card protections, misconnections, cruises, medical issues abroad, award travel gaps, and why the coverage you think you may have may not nearly be as strong as you might assume. So this episode is really about the advanced side of points and miles, the side where the opportunities can be huge, but the margin for error gets a lot smaller. Welcome to the BoldlyGo Podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Coke. I've got a fantastic guest ready for all of you all today. But before we introduce him, a few housekeeping reminders as always. Remember, you can catch all these episodes in their full entirety on our YouTube channel. I know most of you listen on audio, but if you wanted to watch episode, you can as well. But for those of you that are with us on YouTube, thank you. But also, don't forget, you are going to miss half of our show because every Friday, if you're not subscribed on audio, we put out our quick hits. That's our up-to-date news in travel, points and miles, the things that you want to know that's come out for this week in points and miles and travel, the things that you don't want to miss. We have all of that put together for you there. That comes out every single Friday. Don't forget, we have our podcast library linked in the show notes as well. If you want to search through our library of episodes or look at episodes for just beginners or intermediate or advanced or hotel strategies, flight strategies, trips to the Maldives, whatever you want to search for, you can find that there. And we do have our timestamp, so you can fast forward, go backwards, or whatever it may be. And wherever you are listening or watching this, please don't forget to like this, subscribe, and of course, we would always love a 5-star rating and review. So we have a guest today I'm very excited to have on the show. This was an introduction. If you remember back in episode 116 with Max Craig, Max came in and talked all about Southwest and why he thought it was still a viable strategy for right now, viable airline for right now, I should say. But more importantly, he did a really great deep dive on the companion pass. It was the ultimate guide to the companion pass. So if you haven't caught that, I'd highly recommend you going back to episode 116. Well, he recommended Patrick Sugarman to come on the show today for 2 reasons, and both of those reasons are going to be what we're talking about today. First, Patrick has an expertise in the use of buying and reselling gold, which I'm fascinated on talking through, and in travel insurance as well. And so, Patrick, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you.
Excited to be here, DeAndre. Thanks so much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Patrick. I know we're going to get to some really great topics today, but before we get into the subject matter for today, Patrick, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself? You know, where do you live and how did you get into the points and miles world?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a Michigan native, born and raised kind of outside of the Detroit, Michigan area. Been here my whole life. The points and miles life kind of found me a little bit back in, I'd say like early 2014, 2015. I was one of those kids that grew up whose parents kind of, couldn't really afford to take us to Wally World every year. Our family vacations consisted of just going to the beach or, hanging around the house, And I saw my friends at school, everywhere else, they're going out to like the Bahamas, they're getting these nice tans, they're getting the cornrows put in, like the whole thing, right? And I got jealous. So, growing up that way, growing up with all that, I finally got to a point where I was able to figure it out myself, to pick up some credit cards. I was earning enough money where I could dabble a little bit, book my own trips. And it just kind of spiraled out of control at that point. I learned about the Chase cards. I learned about American Airlines, American Miles, looked at some really like solid destinations to visit out of Detroit, looked for those nonstop flights. And just ran with it.
So how did we go from dabbling in points and miles to getting into some pretty in-depth strategies when it comes to, or not an in-depth, but pretty complex strategies with things like buying and reselling gold? What was the start with kind of that world?
Yeah. good question. It's definitely not something that you jump into overnight, right? There's a definite ramp up period. It's a process. The gold reselling, though, ultimately what it came down to is kind of just another perceived necessity. Like I needed something where I could put in what I thought was minimal effort and get a huge payout at the end. And when I was, walking around shopping at Costco, just the gold bars that they have in the jewelry counter caught my eye. I started looking into just how you could maybe offload those locally. I started researching the local coin shops, the local jewelry counters just down the street from my house, walked in there, asked questions, and just kind of figured out that there was a real arbitrage opportunity that I could just walk into. And at the time when I was doing this, gold was probably about $1,800 an ounce at that time. So that's a far cry from the $4,200, $4,300 that it is today, right? So back then, nobody else is doing it. Nobody's walking in. You could go into Costco. You could grab as much as you want up to the limits that they would let you buy. And you could do whatever you want with it. You could do that every day. So, I dabbled, like I said, in the beginning. I bought, maybe just a couple grams. They have little 10-gram packs. Then I moved up to 1 ounce bars. Then I moved up to 5 1 ounce bars. And now every time I go into Costco, when I'm on a mission, when I'm doing this play, it's 10 bars each time. Boom, boom, boom.
That's incredible. Now, I got to preface for the audience that, of course, as a financial advisor, I'm not giving financial advice through this podcast. And so none of this that we're going to talk through is going to be construed as financial advice. This is all going to be more entertainment purposes. But I'm really curious to think and talk through this because as an advisor, someone who is familiar with how markets move and that different asset classes, and gold, which we consider precious metals, which is in the commodities asset class, performs very, very different than AI stocks, obviously, right? So I'm really curious as to when it comes to this process of buying and reselling gold, what makes it different than other reselling categories, and what was your goal behind it? I can guess, but I'd love to hear what made you, besides seeing the numbers of what you can do, kind of how did you grow this into what people that are familiar with it know of it as today?
Yeah, so you're right. There are a lot of other categories that you can look into. Reselling just in general goes from electronics to kids' toys, Christmas stockpiling. I mean, anything, any kind of collectible that's out there, right? But when I started looking into those, and I've done those before, I've been part of the buying groups and the reselling groups that do the big packages from Dell or whatever. But when I started to do it more and more and more, you would get home and there's 10 boxes, there's 10 laptops sitting on your porch, right? I mean, not only is that an easy target, but that's just a lot of stuff. That's a lot of junk. Takes up a lot of space, takes up a lot of time having to repackage, put new labels on, ship stuff back out. It was just a lot of work. And again, I wanted something that was easy. All right. I want to push the easy button. I don't want to work for this stuff. All right. And that's not to say that there aren't groups out there that let you just ship it directly to them too. So you don't have to be the middleman. You don't have to have everything shipped to your house. But one of the issues that I came across with that is, my accounts would get tagged. They get flagged by the company that I'm buying from. So I would put in the reseller's shipping address, and next thing you know, you get 10 order cancellation emails saying, no, man, we're not going to let you do that. So it's just kind of, I don't know, just one thing after another, one failure after another, one roadblock after another. And that's what got me started looking at just different options.
So I definitely want to get into the risk and understanding the world of buying and reselling gold. Can you explain, and this is as I'm asking because I'm someone who's never looked into this, so I've never done it, so I really know nothing about it at all. Can you explain what the benefits or purpose is in this realm, especially within the points and miles community?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, first and foremost, I think everybody's got their own specific goals out of this, right? I think the major categories that we're talking about, that we're thinking about here are points accumulation, cash back, earning elite status, either with an airline or a hotel. I mean, those are probably the main motivators, the primary motivators for a lot of people doing this. I myself, at one point or another, have kind of each one of those has been my primary motivator. And it just depends on what I'm working on, what's going on in life, Like right now, with my sign-up bonuses complete, I've got most of the credit cards that I want. I have status. I just hit my 60 nights with Hyatt actually today. Right before I got on this call, I got the email congratulating me.
Congrats.
And like 40 of those nights were just from gold reselling. So, there's a lot that you can get out of it. But for me right now, so what's my main goal right now? It's cash. I'm trying to use certain credit cards that give outsized cash back value on this kind of spend. And my thought process there is for all the things that I can't use points and miles on, I now have this bucket of cash that I kind of have earmarked that I can now use for travel purposes. And that money's not just sitting around. You're a financial advisor. You know how to make money work for you. And I try to do the same thing. I'll put that money in a high yield savings account. I'll give it to my financial advisor to invest for me. It's making money while it's sitting the whole time, though, just earmarked for travel later on.
So can we talk through, what does a successful version of this strategy look like in reality? Because I can imagine we go to Costco, we buy, 10 grand worth of gold. Let's just say maybe it's 5, maybe it's 1,000, whatever it may be. Let's go smaller. We'll say $1,000 worth of gold. And of course we can use a credit card that maybe a card specifically that at Costco gets us 5%, maybe higher cash back, or we're using a Venture X that gets us 2x points, or we're hitting a sub or a sign up bonus, right? So obviously there's the benefits there, but then from a reselling standpoint, are we buying for 1,000 and typically selling for 1,000 or 1,010 or $1,200? What does that typically look like? And I know obviously markets move, price probably changes and fluctuates day by day, but is this something that you're trying to get today and move tomorrow, or get today, hold for X amount of time? What does a successful version of this strategy really look like?
Yeah, good question. Before I answer that, I want to ask you your opinion on what does that look like to you? You've never done it before. You're an outsider looking in, but you have a really unique perspective because of the day job, right? If you're in there doing that, what are you thinking, knowing how volatile the markets are and all that? What's your play?
So, guys, for listeners, this is on the spot. This is not rehearsed or planned or anything like that. I didn't know Patrick was going to ask me this question. So, I think if I'm thinking through this, and because I don't ever go to Costco or Sam's or BJ's, I don't remember which card gives the extra percentages at the big box stores. But I feel like there's at least 4 to 5% we can get. So, in my head, I'm thinking I'm going in, I'm going to buy $1,000 worth of gold. I'm going to get a card that gets me 4 to 5% cash back, perhaps. And this is if I'm not in the points and miles world, or sorry, if I'm just in a cash back world, not transferable currency points. But let's say maybe Amex Gold. Actually, does the Amex Gold get you 4x in Costco?
Well, the thing about Costco, you can only use Visa or MasterCard for purchases. Visa only in store, MasterCard online. So Amex is out, unfortunately.
See this, guys, it tells you how much I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to go in and I'm thinking if I'm going for the financial strategy that you mentioned, which is earning cash, I'm going to go in, I'm going to buy something. If I buy for 1,000, I'm getting as much cash back as I possibly can. I'm just going to guess and say that's 5%. So on $1,000, I'm getting $50 in cash back on that 1,000. In my mind, I would think their price of gold is probably tracking with the markets in somewhat. So I should be able to the very next day sell it somewhere for ideally as close to that 1,000 as possible. Maybe a little bit of a gain, maybe a little bit of a loss, but with the cash back I earned, there should be some arbitrage in there so that if that 1,000 is now worth $990 and I use a 5% card, I've still made $40. And if it's worth $1,010, I've made $60 in total. And now I have this $60 in essence to play with and do something with. So I think that's the arbitrage strategy that would come to mind for me. I could be completely wrong with that. The other aspect is I would go in, and even if I didn't have the highest cashback card, but I was getting a card that had a huge sign-up bonus or something like that, I'm getting value for my points, obviously. So maybe I'm going in with a Chase Business Sapphire Reserve 200,000 Chase point a sign-up bonus. And so, yes, I'm getting 1x essentially on my spend. However, I'm getting this sign-up bonus, 200,000 points, minimally should be worth about $4,000 for me minimally in travel at least. And then from there, I can of course do whatever I want with that. And ideally, if I go to resell that gold, I'm only losing a few dollars on my timing of doing it. So Patrick, tell me, how was that?
I love it. I mean, you're thinking of all the right aspects, I think. And I knew you would. That's why I lobbed that question to you. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot or make you fumble or anything. We didn't.
I have, in however many hundreds of episodes we have, I don't think I've been put on the spot like that, and I loved it. It was great. So I absolutely love it. That was fantastic.
Good. But no, you're thinking of all the right things. But it's complicated. I mean, those are a lot of moving parts that you're talking about there, right? And if you get one of those things wrong, if you wait too long, if you use the wrong card, if you value something wrong, if your buyer suddenly decides that, they're not offering X price, they're offering Y price, I mean, the whole plan just goes up. It's done. You got to wait. You got to hold. You got to hope prices jump back up. So I can get into my strategy, absolutely. But I think like the broadest answer that I can give to that general question, what does it look like in practice for me? Spreadsheets. All right. And some people hate that because they hate doing that kind of work. They hate tracking. They hate coming home and having to plug in numbers. But that's how you look at all of those different moving parts and make sure they're all moving in the right direction for you. And that means putting in numbers even before you leave the house to go to Costco. Do your research beforehand. Make sure, see what your buyers' prices are. Look at the Costco website to see what their prices are. Look at the general gold per ounce price. Compare those numbers. Look at which credit card you're thinking about using or credit cards that you're thinking about using if you don't have enough limit. Apply a value to the points that you're going to earn, and then try to figure out, what kind of cash value you're going to have at the end of this whole transaction. And that'll give you your plus or minus at the end of the day. But like, I've gone into Costco before. I've done all this work. I've had my plan. I've done the whole thing. And I walk in and, my buyer is at, let's just say plus $20 per ounce. So great. Okay. I'll get 5 ounces, 10 ounces, and I'll make a couple bucks there. This works for me. But then by the time you get to the jewelry counter and you're filling out your little slip, you check your phone again, you look at the price. Now the buyer's paying negative $10 an ounce. Well, crap. What do I do? Am I going to keep doing this and lose money today? But no, you think things are going to spike again, right? So you fill out your slip, you go up to the cash register, you pay your money, you swipe your cards, you do the whole song and dance with them, you get the fraud alert from your bank that takes 10 minutes to clear up. It's a whole process, right? And at the end of that portion, shoot, gold's up to plus $100 an ounce. So now you're thinking like, this is great. I'm really making money today. Last part, you get to the cage where they keep the gold at Costco. You get your 5, your 10 bars, whatever. You head over to the food court to get your slice of pizza, right? And as you sit down and eat that pizza, you go on the website, you type in what you have, you click the sell button, and now you're only $5 plus $5 per ounce. So it is a wild ride, right? I mean, there's a lot of up, there's a lot of down, just a ton of volatility. And even if you are doing those spreadsheets, you're doing the pre-work, you're checking as you're going to the store, as you're filling out the slip, I mean, things can change like that, like in an instant.
So when it comes to, that level of volatility is, very similar in some ways to just how the market might move in a single day or within a single hour even. So I understand that aspect. I'm curious, when you said your buyer, is this you have established relationship with pawn shops or jewelry stores locally? Is this through groups that you can be a part of online, a mixture of the two? What does that aspect actually look like?
Yeah. That's probably the most difficult part for people to kind of wrap their heads around, right? Because that's just another moving part, but it's based on where you are locally, or partly it can be based on where you are locally. But like you said, there are online sources and resources that you can tap into. You got to be comfortable with basically shipping $20,000 to $50,000 worth of gold in a cardboard box to some random internet stranger, and then hope that you get paid back in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. But, most of those people that you're dealing with, most of those buyers, they're also kind of local, right? Those are the people that you meet up at the Points and Miles seminars and the conferences and the meetups and all that. They're in the groups that we're all in. They have a lot of value, a lot of knowledge, and they share a lot of their resources, which is just stellar. But those are the targets that I'm looking at. I've used individual people that I've sold to, but there are online resources that you can use and online websites. One of the websites that I use is Collect Pure. They've consistently been great for me. Their rates are solid. Their turnaround time to sending back the payments has always been good. Not as fast as some of the other ones that are in our local Points and Miles group. So they've definitely got a leg up there. But again, it's just simple. It's easy. It's automated. It's familiar at this point. So that's what I use. And it's one of those that you can just hop on your phone. You can check at any given time. You don't have to wait for somebody to get back to you or anything like that. And there's no gatekeeping for it either. You sign up on their website, boom, you've got an account, you got full access.
And so I do need to make the listeners know for you all to make sure you do your due diligence, because obviously Patrick has found what he's felt comfortable with. But we're talking, as he mentioned, some serious money movement strategies. This goes way beyond what we typically talk about on the show when it comes to, points and miles and credit card spend and hitting sign-up bonuses and some of the payroll on credit card stuff we do. This is a whole different world there. So I can't encourage enough to make sure you do your due diligence in all the ways so that you are well informed and can make the right decisions. But Patrick, I think this is super both helpful and insightful as well, because this is a world I know existed, and we've had some people within our WhatsApp community chat even talk a little bit about it. But this is something just been so foreign to me because I haven't really had a need to do it and or really an interest in doing it as well. As I didn't even know that you can't use a Amex in Costco. I haven't been in a Costco in probably 5 years. So that's really interesting. Can you talk through outside? So you mentioned market movement. You mentioned the risk with buyers and sellers. And I guess, that can be a whole other world as well, because obviously, again, someone can just walk away with thousands of dollars in gold. And I'm sure there's things that have to be done and ramifications of that. But what about credit card or bank scrutiny? Because this is where I'd be a little bit concerned as well for our listeners, because are people going to be risking if seeing these charges? What's the risk there really from a card standpoint? Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good perspective to look into. All of us that are in this hobby depend on our credit cards, right? To generate the points, generate the currency that we use to get our nearly free travel, to take our families on those, once in a lifetime trips every year. So to be cut out of a card ecosystem as a whole, yeah, that's scary, man. That's very scary. I'm much more comfortable buying gold at Costco than I was when I was doing like gift card reselling, for example. If you're going to Costco, you're making a purchase, if there's level whatever data that comes along with that purchase, your bank is going to see that you're at Costco, you're spending X amount of dollars, and that's it. It's Costco, right? It's a household name. They sell anything and everything, and shoot, gold is just one of those things. It's dangerous. You can run into volume issues. You can run into overcharging or cycling your cards. And those are things that you just don't want to do in general. Whether you're doing gold reselling or gift cards or just using your card as intended, you don't really want to be cycling that credit limit every month over and over and over. Stay off the radar. But for the fact that you're just going to your local store, you're picking up some products, it's a normal Sunday. So in my mind, even if a bank did want to come and take a look at my account, look at my statements, ask me what I'm doing, sure, I can tell you. I'm stocking up, man.
I'm a doomsday prepper. What else do I need?
Exactly.
I love that. I do think it's really important. Again, I know I keep throwing the disclaimers out and the listeners are probably, we get it. But I do, obviously, I wanted to make sure to frame this conversation in very specifically because this is a really unique topic. It is very sensitive and strategic as well. But that could be the place. We've had individuals in our WhatsApp community that have said, man, I don't know how I'm going to hit the spend for an Amex Business Platinum that requires $20K in 3 months. I don't have a business. I can't do our payroll and credit card strategy. I can't do any of these other things. I can never get this card. This could be an area that could work, but again, you have to do your research and do your due diligence. And I would also argue, don't put yourself in a position or force yourself into a position where you feel like you have to do something like this if you're not comfortable with it as well. Obviously, you'd want to do your research and talk to people and be in groups, maybe come to some of these meetups, ask people questions in person to feel a lot more comfortable. Would you say that's probably a pretty sound direction to go in?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I would never be talking to somebody and saying, yes, just do it. There's no risk. Jump in. I do this all the time. It works for me. It's going to work for you. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe pricing just goes up, goes down, goes left, goes right, whatever. I mean, it's not for everybody.
Well, Patrick, how do you personally decide when a deal is worth it versus when to walk away? I mean, let's say, and I don't know how far Costco is from you, but let's just say you decide this day you're going to make the trek. You did the research. As you said, the pricing can change plus or minus within seconds all throughout the day. Before you've either purchased the gold or before you've hit the process of selling it, at what point do you decide whether the deal it's time to walk away? Like, hey, this isn't worth it. And I'm sure everyone can have their different metrics, right? I mean, someone can decide to buy gold today and then just hold it and sell it 5 years from now, maybe. So everyone's risk tolerance is going to be different. But I'm curious for you personally, what's your threshold or what prompts your decision making?
Yeah, it's fluid, honestly. I mean, from one day to the next, it can change. I think at this point, because my goal for the gold reselling is to generate cash money profit, I'm really paying attention to what those numbers, the actual Costco gold price and then my buyer's price, just very carefully, right? And when those numbers line up just in that perfect way where I know I can earn, I don't know, $500, $600, $1,000 just by running up to the store, that's when I hop up at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, whatever it is, get up from my desk, hop in the car, take that 10-minute drive to Costco and get it done. All right, checking my phone the whole way, not while I'm driving, of course, but at stoplights and such. But just keeping an eye on that volatility, on that pricing to make sure the numbers still make sense. That's what I'm looking at now. It wasn't always the case, though. It wasn't always like that. I mean, like we've talked about, I had sign-up bonus goals. I had minimum spend goals. I wanted to earn elite status with Hyatt, with American Airlines, with just different brands. And that's where you get a little bit more flexible on kind of what you're willing to, I guess I'll say, lose. So if I can earn, with 60 nights with X amount of spend on my Hyatt cards, if I can earn my Hyatt Elite Night credit, like what is that worth to me on a cash basis? And I kind of just use that number as, I don't know, a starting point, a guide, a template to figure out what kind of losses I can tolerate each time I go to Costco. Now, obviously, the goal isn't to consistently lose money when you do this. So hopefully you get lucky some of these days and you can earn a profit. But when I was doing it for that was kind of my guiding principle, I guess, and when the deal is worth it or not.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And if you've gotten any value so far, it would mean the world if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep creating great content. Also, if you're feeling stuck or want help with points and miles, whether it's picking your first card, planning a big redemption, or even having someone book it all for you, we've got you covered. There's a link in the show notes to schedule a free points and miles consultation. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, tell us your goals, and we'll take it from there. And don't forget, our newsletter and private Facebook group are great ways to stay on top of breaking news, updated card offers, and tips that don't always make it into the podcast. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. I'm seeing so many similarities with what we talk about when we talk about how to earn points for payroll, because with that, I mean, there are pros and cons. And basically, as you said, like going after elite status or getting redemption value or points earning value can be huge. Now, specifically with what you're doing, you have an ability to arbitrage to earn actual cash money. Whereas on the payroll by credit card strategy, we talk about that's more so you can earn a multiplier, maximum multiplier of points, specifically transferable points. The arbitrage is not really going to work out from a cash standpoint. But like for me personally, I've pivoted over the last month or so to putting my payroll on my Hyatt business credit card so that I can get the nights I need to get to Globalist, which I've calculated out with the regular stays I have for the year, how much I need to put on the card to make sure I get to Globalist for the year. And we're going to make sure we do the same thing with American Airlines to get Platinum Pro. And then outside of that, once I've hit my goals, I'm going to be getting my 3x multiplier to earn as much chase points as I possibly can. So I can understand that the strategy is really really going to be tied down to what makes the most sense for you, but also what you're comfortable with. For you, you've built up a comfort with this process of buying and reselling gold. I've built up a comfort with how to earn points for payroll and credit card, where some business owners are like, hey, we don't want to deal with this. This is extra steps. There's things that we need to do. I'd argue the risk is dramatically less, but there's, opportunity there as well. So I think this is absolutely a fantastic breakdown of everything. I want to move on just for time to our next topic, but anything else in this kind of world of buying and reselling gold that you think you really want to hit on for the listener specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I think like you said, do your due diligence, right? Research, read, ask questions. Do not just jump into it, go to Costco, buy a handful of gold and assume that you're going to have elite status, at the end of that. Know what you're getting into, spreadsheet it, keep track of it however you want, but do that due diligence. I think that's honestly the number one takeaway.
I absolutely love it. So do your due diligence to make it happen, if you want to make it happen, I should say. Now, let's say someone decided they did their due diligence, they're going to go ahead and they are buying their reselling gold, they're getting the status, they're getting the sign-up bonuses, they're getting the points, they're doing all of those things, and they have now booked some incredible trips for their family. But now we got to segue to the other part of the show, which is about travel insurance, which I know you have an expertise in as well. And I think a lot of people have different thoughts on travel insurance. I know I have my own. I'm curious where they're going to fall as well. But why should we in the points and miles space be interested or knowledgeable about travel insurance when a lot of our credit cards have trip insurance covered?
Well, I mean, do they? Do they really?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's the question that I look at now. 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, whenever the CSR came out, back in 2017?
2016, yeah, 10 years ago.
2016, okay. I would agree with you. Yeah, the credit card has good coverage included. It has good, real insurance coverage. You got your emergency medical, you got your trip cancellation, your trip interruption, your trip delay. You got all these great products that are just in a credit card that you already have, that you're using to earn points and travel free with, or nearly free. But today, the last couple years, I mean, just like everything else in this hobby, it's been devalued. There have been devaluations that have come on, some of them pretty abruptly, some of them just a little bit here, a little bit there. And over time, I personally feel like those credit card benefits, not insurance anymore, but just benefits, are watered down to the point where, I mean, you really should be thinking about supplementing coverage for these big family, all-out family trips that you're taking.
So what are the things that most people assume are covered, but they actually are not when it comes to trip insurance, whether it's with credit cards or not?
That is a tough question because, I mean, the answer is everything. People that I talk to, the clients that I talk to, customers, people that are buying insurance, they're saying like, hey, I'm going to get this policy from you, Patrick, because if I just don't feel like going on my trip anymore, I'm going to cancel it and it's going to reimburse me for everything. I'm like, well, hold up there. Wait a second. That's not exactly how this works. There's a variation of that, cancel for any reason coverage that you can get. But even that, it's not any reason. It's a reasonable reason. And it's not all the money back that you spent on the trip. It's a certain percentage of your non-refundable or extra expenses, your non-refundable costs or your extra expenses. So like, there's unfortunately a pretty big misunderstanding about what is included, what you can get out of it, what's covered, what's not covered. I do my best to educate. I do my best to talk about these kind of things. I offer, one-on-one consultations when somebody's going on a big trip and they want to figure out, do I really need a standalone insurance policy when my Venture card, when my Chase card, when my Ritz card, when my whatever is kind of my primary way to make sure that I'm covered. Now, even after saying all that, even after, hearing my thoughts and opinions about the benefits of cards, sometimes the card is enough. I mean, sometimes the little trip that you're taking, maybe it's a small weekend getaway to a state or two over, maybe it's a short flight, maybe you're driving, whatever it is. Yeah, maybe it is enough. Maybe you didn't really spend enough money to where if you were to lose that money, I mean, it's not going to bankrupt you. It's not going to wreck you. It's not going to ruin your day. You get a little annoyed from it, but it's not going to ruin your day, right? And in those kind of situations, yeah, maybe a card is fine. But then you start looking at the bigger trips. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, those, once in a lifetime trips that you're taking every year with the family, those big luxury travel trips to far off wherever. Then you probably should start really researching, really looking into, are the card benefits enough? Is a standalone policy enough? Is the annual policy that I have enough? How do I supplement? Is it cheap? Is it expensive? Where do I go for it? All these things I think need to be researched.
That's really interesting. And I agree with so much of what you just said. I know we were talking off air before the show. We both have our insurance licenses. Mine is only in the realm of, life insurance and long-term care and health insurance, those type of things. So I'm not well versed in kind of the travel and trip insurance side of things, but I'm a very huge proponent of insurance and where it can fit, just like if it's a financial plan, where it can fit in the personal world. And from my standpoint, on our show, we've talked about world nomads and a good amount. We've promoted them on our site and our blog. I've been buying insurance from them for all of our big trips since 2019, and I've never actually ever needed to file a claim with them until our honeymoon, which was over a month long. And so we talked about that on the show, and they covered literally everything that we had an issue with. And we had multiple, between delayed flights, my wife getting sick multiple times, us having a concierge doctor come to the hotel twice in 2 different countries. I mean, across the board. My thought process, and I'm saying all these things because I also want to ask you if the thought process is right, because I think the listeners could find value in what I think, and also to confirm whether this is right or not, is if I have the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which is actually how I book any and all my flights. I just put every flight on my Chase Sapphire Reserve. 99% of the flights. I might, if it's a small, small flight with like regional flight within a country, I might use my Aspire card to get the $50 Hilton credit in a quarter. But besides that, almost all my flights, my taxes and fees, everything, I use the Chase Sapphire Reserve because of the top tier travel protections. I was like, if we get sick or something happens in another destination or someplace in a hotel that wasn't paid for with this card or whatever it may be, I might have paid for the positioning flight or the taxes and fees, but it gets so muddy with like, what are we buying and what card are we using and where does that come into play if we get sick somewhere else, that I was just like, I want something that's going to be over encompassing and kind of like an umbrella trip policy for the entire trip versus trying to figure out which card's covering what. That was my logic. I'm really curious, does that make sense, or no, I'm actually probably good with just the CSR?
Yeah. Good explanation, good situation, good scenario. Good job explaining it. That was my concern back in the day too. Yeah. I mean, I'm using my CSR for this, my American card for this, my Amex card for this. What do I have to do to make sure each individual part is covered, right? And I mean, good news here is that typically with these card benefits, as long as you're paying for like the common carrier portion, you're usually going to have everything else be covered as long as it's an actual covered event, right? So there's not a whole lot of juggling. There's not a whole lot of figuring out this and that. As long as that one component is paid for with that card, either in part or in full, depending on the terms of that card, you're good to go for your trip. So it's very similar to kind of what you'd be getting in a standalone policy. So that standalone policy, you buy it for the trip and it's everything in the trip. You're good to go. So similar that way. But where is it different? It's different in all those ways that I mentioned in the beginning of the first question. It's different types of coverage. It's devalued coverage, devalued benefits, I should say at this point. Reduced limits, conditional limits, high deductibles maybe. I mean, it's all those little things that kind of just chip away from the value, the intrinsic value that was, once pretty good. So for example, one of the big devaluations that this is what kind of tipped me over the edge. This is why I don't really use that. This is why I don't rely on my CSR anymore or CSP or anything to book trips and expect good coverage for cancellation or interruption. Back in November of 24, Chase changed the trip cancellation and the trip interruption coverage on the CSP to CSR cards. What it said back then, before November 24, it said charge any portion of your common carrier trip to the card and you're going to get essentially $20,000 of coverage for cancellation and interruption reasons. Obviously, there has to be a covered cause that allows you to actually get that coverage, but, different conversation. But you were covered up to that 20 grand, right? So after November 24, they tweaked the wording just a little bit, and they said, however much you spend on that credit card for the trip, for that common carrier purchase, that's the limit of insurance that you're going to get.
Oh, wow.
So think about that. A points and miles traveler, what do we usually put on our credit cards when we book a flight?
Taxes and fees, and that's it.
Taxes and fees. So let's say $11 up to, let's just call it $500. Are you going to be happy with $11 in cancellation and interruption coverage for your trip?
No.
The answer is no. Right, of course. But it's that one. That's the big kind of like, oh no, what happened that got me, that pushed me finally to just, I don't even consider it for the most part anymore. When I have a trip coming up, whether it's domestic, a short, 1 or 2 state hop, if it's something international, if it's family, if it's solo, whatever, I'm either relying on the annual, like an Allianz annual policy, or I'm supplementing with standalone policies with maybe higher limits, lower deductibles, different conditions, all that good stuff. Because I want to know that if something does happen, it's not going to break the bank. I'm not going to have to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to get back on my feet, to get back home, to, I don't know, be seen at the hospital, whatever it is. I don't want to be in that position. Now, I think I'm probably a little bit more risk averse than most. So every trip that I'm taking, I'm getting a policy for. Everybody's different though. Everybody's, your risk tolerance can be miles and miles above mine. And you might not need it.
I'm curious here, Patrick. Let's say, in the points and miles community, right, many of us are often doing positioning flights. Where I live in Norfolk, Virginia, I have to position everywhere before our big long haul points-based flights. That's usually to JFK or Miami, Chicago, Dallas, something like that. And when I do position, to be clear, I typically try to position in, maybe we're landing in that city at 10 a.m. and our flight out's at 10 p.m. So we have a huge window, or I do the night before. But hypothetically, let's say for whatever reason, my positioning flight to get there is canceled and delayed or delayed, or just there's some issue with that. And that affects my ability to get on my long haul points flight. Is there any insurance that would cover that? So I know maybe my credit card wouldn't, but would my, like a misconnection coverage or something like that like World Nomads provides, or maybe Allianz or other carriers do? Can you talk through like the differences in scenarios that one thing might cover versus another?
Yeah, definitely. Your question is really unique, right? You're talking about a flight that's departing your home airport where you live, right? And that's delayed, so you can't get your international connection or whatever it is. You can't get on the cruise, all that thing. Well, every policy's wording is different, right? The policies that I've seen that I mostly deal with every day, there's usually a condition in those that says you got to be 50 to 100 miles away from your home before coverage is going to kick in, right? So yeah, think about you're at your home airport. That's, it's not 50 or 100 miles away from your home. That is your home. That's where you're based out of. That's where you fly out of. That's where you're at, right? So I'm not saying that every policy is like that, but the ones that I'm familiar with, the ones that I work with, you're not going to find coverage for that particular situation right there. But fast forward a little bit. Let's say you are connected. Let's say you get your flight from, like for me, from Detroit to JFK, and you're waiting at JFK, and then your next connector over to Amsterdam or wherever is delayed or canceled, or something gets changed, right? Or there's a weather condition. Yeah, you're golden. You're good because you meet the conditions of the policy. You're 50 to 100 plus miles away from your home. There's been some type of covered cause of loss that allows coverage to kick in. And because you did your due diligence, you read your policy, right? Everything that's in there, which nobody does, by the way. That nobody does that. But anyway, all that. So you can spend X amount of dollars on food and beverage, Y amount of dollars on a hotel for the night, Z amount of dollars maybe on a cash flight to catch up to the trip that you're missing out on, or the cruise that you're missing out on. Like all those things. In certain situations, as long as it's a covered cause of loss, all those things are covered. Those are reimbursable events.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I know, of course, you have the policies that you're super familiar with. So I would encourage the listeners, like in general, again, do your due diligence, because there could be certain things in the policy that you're looking at that could apply or not apply. I do know World Nomads, I haven't had to make a claim on this, so I can't speak to it, but I do know they actually have in there, in one of their policy levels, like $3,000, I believe it is, like misconnection reimbursement. But to your point, I don't know the language on when the coverage kicks in. So I don't know if it's a 10, 15, 100 miles away from your home airport for that to kick in specifically. So I do think things like that are very nuanced, but allows the listeners and myself to understand you can't just rely on trip insurance through your credit card. I agree with you completely. The domestic flight, like if I'm flying to Miami for the weekend, I'm not buying trip protection for that. And I'm not going to buy when the airline's like, hey, do you want to add this to your flight? I'm not doing that because I know my Sapphire Reserve is going to cover it. But for these Maldives or Bali or Fiji or New Zealand or whatever it may be type, once in a lifetime, but every single year trips, that's a lot bigger deal for sure. So let me ask you this. When the disruption happens, what should be the next step that someone does? Obviously, we're upset. We want to complain. We might be stuck in a city when we got kids and we try to find a hotel room. Like, what should be the thing that people either need to make sure they don't forget to do or do next? Whatever is easiest to kind of talk through.
Yeah. The easiest way I think to answer that is really just to say the first thing you do is honestly stop, think, don't panic. Right? You have so many other people that are either getting off the plane that hear that the next flight is canceled, delayed, whatever. There's a weather situation and they're forced to spend the night in the airport. Everybody's scrambling. Everybody's panicking. They're running to grab their bag. They're running to go to a gate agent. They're asking questions. They're yelling. They're arguing. They're complaining. But what are you doing? You're sitting there and you're remembering, yeah, my travel insurance policy has a condition that says if I'm delayed for 6 hours or overnight, I can charge up to $500 to get a hotel room. Man, but all these other people are here. They're trying to get a hotel room too. I should probably just call the hotel right now and get that done. You think about those kind of things when you can stop, when you can reflect, when you can just, think through the problem. And that's the hardest thing for people to do because you're already in a high stress situation. You've left your house, you're on your trip, you're not in a familiar area, you're traveling literally out of a suitcase, you're living out of a suitcase. And the last thing you need to do is have some unexpected just happen and just blow the whole thing up, right? So I'd say the very first thing, just stop, collect yourself, take 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, and just think, what do I have in place? What can I trigger to help me pay for these extra expenses? Or what can I do to help catch up to my trip and make the cruise on time or make the connecting flight in country B or C on time? And then just execute that plan. I think for some of the bigger, broader, bulkier, more feature-rich insurance policies. And, I'm thinking Allianz when I say that. Allianz is I would say the gold standard when it comes to these types of coverages. They have a concierge that you can call. So even if you don't remember, even if you didn't read your policy when you got it before your trip, call that concierge and say, hey, listen, my flight was just canceled and I have to be at the port of call in, however many hours. How do we get there? What do I do? And they'll talk you through it. They'll say, yeah, on page 20 of your policy, you've got this type of coverage. It's triggered by this situation, which you just told me happened. Go spend $2,000 on your flight and, submit the paperwork when you're back home.
That's great. I didn't actually know that that's something that existed, the concierge aspect to call in. I've never thought about calling the insurance company to say, what can I do in this situation? I've most of the time just winged it and just been like, well, I'm assuming this is going to be covered. I'm just going to save all the receipts and submit it and see what happens. And for the most part, that's worked out. But I guess documenting the cost of what you're spending would be the huge next step as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, like you just said, save your receipts, take screenshots of app notifications, take pictures. Go to the gate agent or some kind of airline personnel and get that formal letter that says, yes, your flight was delayed because of this reason on this date, this time, your name, blah, blah, blah. Get everything that you can so you can submit that all in a nice, neat little package to the insurance company. Write your little narrative that says, this is what happened. This is what I collected. Here it is in bulleted format. This is what I'm asking for. Here are my receipts. Just prepare, right? Think through it. figure out what they're going to want, send it in, get taken care of. It's funny that you mentioned about the concierge thing too. I mean, that's something to me, I guess because I'm like in the weeds on this stuff and I work, the risk management, commercial insurance for the day job, like that's just a second nature kind of thing, right? It's something that just pops in my head and I know it's available and I know it's there and I use it a lot. But you're right. Not a ton of people, I guess, really think about that. One of my clients recently, her and her husband were on a trip out in Bali. And unfortunately, we're in a little bit of an accident on an ATV tour. She suffered a broken leg, right? And you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no hospital nearby. There's no phone that she can connect with other than like the tour guide that's taking her around. So she grabbed that phone. She made the call, got the number from the app on her phone for Allianz, talked to the concierge. And that concierge, while they're out in the middle of nowhere, like I said, organized an ambulance to come pick them up, called ahead to the hospital, got a doctor, got surgeons on staff. She had to get emergency surgery when she arrived. That concierge also connected that doctor with a evacuation company, a medical evacuation company. They talked through the details, got her approved for her emergency medical evacuation, and she was back home, in bed, resting up, 4 days later, I think it was. So, I mean, there's definite value in having that resource available. Know that it's there, use it.
Well, before we wrap this one up, Patrick, is there any particular aspect of travel insurance, trip insurance? I know we covered a lot, but specifically that those of us in the points and miles world should pay special attention to or keep in mind when we're talking about booking luxury trips with points? Anything that we haven't covered else that you think would be really beneficial, vital information for our community?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously points and miles travel is very different than cash travel. Cash travel, you're paying literally $20,000 for your trip. If you have a trip cancellation policy, let's just say that you can get all that money back. But with points and miles, you can take that same $20,000 trip, but you're really only spending, let's say, $500 out of pocket. Well, that's your cancellation benefit, $500, your non-refundable cash costs. So, think through what it is that you're actually spending on your trip, not the perceived value of it, but what's really coming out of your pocket. And I'd say start there, all right? That's going to be the number that you're looking at for your cancellation, your interruption coverages. But aside for that, look at the small stuff too. Look at the ancillary benefits. I would say like emergency medical, trip delay, lost baggage, damaged baggage, all those little just additions here and there, they add up big time. And, when you're in that situation where just, God forbid something happens, something goes wrong, you have to call on one of those things, it's good to know that they're there, so read that policy ahead of time, know what triggers the benefits, know how much you can spend, have a little cheat sheet written down in your pocket, on your phone, whatever. Use it as it's intended to be used. Get max value. All right.
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, Patrick, but I'm really curious. Let's say you have someone that booked a Hilton stay for, I don't know, 1 million Hilton points. And maybe they did buy points, but either way, 1 million Hilton points. This is part of their trip, but they had to cancel that stay. It was non-refundable because of the timing. It was 2 days before they were supposed to check in during the holidays or whatever it may be. Is there a world or a policy or anything that you've seen that gives either some sort of value for the Hilton points, or, I mean, obviously the insurance company can't reimburse you your Hilton points, but is there a scenario where you see the person getting their coverage on the point side outside of cash? And I know, again, this is really unique to us, but I'm wondering if you've ever heard or seen anything like that by chance.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. All right. Because this is one of these little gray area, just insurance nerd kind of things that I think about, that I have thought about. And here's what it is. I think the basic, most streamlined, acceptable answer that I can tell you is no. I don't think there's a way to get, to submit that to the insurance company and them to say, yep, $1 million or 1 million points worth of money is what we're going to reimburse you. I don't think that's something that's available, right? I haven't seen it on any of the policies that I have. I think the closest thing to it would be like a points redeposit fee reimbursement. So if you're going to get charged $1,000 to redeposit those points, you can claim that $1,000, right? So that's the first thing. But the second thing when you and I make a credit card referral at the end of the year, we get a 1099 for that, right? So that's income. All right. Now, if it's income, your points have intrinsic value. And if they have value, they're a currency. And if you're using those points on your trip and something happens, you have to forfeit them, whatever, why can't you make a claim against currency, lost currency? Yeah, it's a point, but you got a piece of paper from the IRS or from your bank saying those points are worth X amount of dollars and you have to pay taxes on that, right?
Yep.
Why can't you claim that? I don't know. I haven't done it yet. I don't have any clients that have done it yet, but I'm very, very interested to see, what happens in that claim scenario when somebody says, here's the documentation, here's the currency that I use, that I pay taxes on. I would like to get reimbursed for it.
So for the listeners out there, I would love if you are in our WhatsApp community or through our email subscription, or say if you have our email, which is in the show notes, and our newsletter, or on YouTube, if you have tried this and had success, I would love to hear, because I would love to come back and report back on this. I haven't had to, thankfully, do this, but I agree with you, right? We have a 1099 for points specifically when we refer someone to a card, not necessarily by getting a sign-up bonus, but also I can very easily prove how much I paid for those points. With Hilton as an example, if I bought the points for Hilton, I can show how much I paid for each point. Now, just earning through Hyatt or transferring points is a little bit different, but I'm very curious as well, because there could be some times where that exists, because I'm sure there's people who have taken flights that they weren't in the points and mile space. They don't do what we do. It took them 10 years to build up all their points, and they did a redemption, and that trip had to get canceled. I am sure someone out there has fought or tried to get their points back, and I'm really curious if there was an opportunity to do that as well. So Patrick, this has been absolutely wonderful today. I loved all the things that we cover. We could obviously talk a lot more on all these different subjects at all, but any other thoughts on the trip insurance space at all before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say is, I have a lot of clients come back to me saying they did have a situation, they had to make a claim and it was denied, right? And they left it at that. They got the denial letter, they walked away, they said, oh, bummer, I can't get reimbursed. Well, like I said, my day job, commercial risk, commercial insurance, I've learned that so much of getting claims approved is relationship based. Yes, you have a contract, which is the insurance policy. And yes, that does dictate what can be paid out, what triggers coverage. But at the same time, and that claims adjuster is a person just like you and I. There's somebody you can talk to, you can tell your side of the story, you can give your points to, right? Somebody you can tell your side of the story to, not to convince them, but to give them perspective. And they sometimes can have authority to overturn those denials, just like with like a recon call, same kind of situation. So I guess I'll say, if you've done all the right things, you bought your policy, you did your research, you know what's covered, you had a situation, you collected all of the documentation that you needed, you made your claim and it was denied, don't give up, right? Call back, ask to escalate the situation, gather more evidence, more information, state your case. Try to get it pushed through. Don't take no for an answer.
I love that. Keep on trying. Patrick, where can the listeners connect with you and learn more from you about whether it's trip insurance, travel insurance, gold buying and reselling, all these things? Where's the best place for them to connect with you?
I think the best place to start out is probably our webpage. That's thepointspage.com. We just did a huge overhaul on it actually the past couple weeks. I've added a ton of new tools, some guides, some of the guides for like gold reselling, for award transfer bonuses, just really helpful things that I think people could get a lot of use out of in their daily points and miles kind of journey, I guess I'll say. Aside from that, like our Facebook group is our live real-time Q&A area. Our moderator team does a really good job of making sure everybody's questions are taken care of. But yeah, I would check us out there.
So Patrick, I always like to wrap up the show with two final questions. The first one is, who next should we have on the show? When I asked Max that question, he recommended you. So I'm curious, in your world of points, miles, and travel, who else do you think we should have on our show for a future episode?
All right, so now you're putting me on the spot, right? I wasn't told this question was going to come up. I'm going to say me again, okay? But I'm going to interview you. All right. We're going to talk all about financial planning. We're going to talk about your top 10 trips. We're just going to flip it. We're going to flip it back.
We're going to flip it back on the show. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't had that happen yet before, but we can probably make that one happen. That's awesome, Patrick. I know I asked you this for each individual section, but I'm going to ask you more so overarching on all the things we talked about today. Last question. Any final thoughts?
I think the topic of doing due diligence should be kind of front and center for everything that we talked about today. I think, risk tolerance, your ability to leverage your credit card balances to get points and miles, be safe doing it. Know what you're getting into. Don't overextend yourself. Don't get yourself into a situation where, you're going to go into debt. You have to pay interest. You'll have to, lose money in some of these things. Go slow. Figure out what works, take it step by step. Do your due diligence, go slow, take it step by step. I think that's a great way to wrap up the show. And as you said, it's a key theme in our world of points and miles. Patrick, you've been a fantastic guest. I love the subjects of what we talked about today. The gold buying and reselling was such a new topic to me. Although I know it existed, I've never actually sat down and talked to someone about the ins and outs of it, at least at a high level. So I appreciate you talking through that. But also, I do think the travel and trip insurance aspect was really important to cover as well. So thank you so much again for being on the show today. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and I'm looking forward to the next time so we can flip the script, like I said. Flipping the script. I absolutely love it. For the listeners out there, if you want to connect with Patrick, make sure to connect with him. We'll link to all of his things in the show notes as always. And if you enjoyed this episode today, please be sure to follow us on all of the social media channels, our Instagram account, sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter and our private Facebook group are the only ways to get into our WhatsApp community chat. If you want to be in a very helpful but also talkative group of points and miles enthusiasts. And as always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, leave a rating, leave a review. Remember to live well, travel boldly, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.